everybody, so we've got a fun review today as we're finally discussing Saw X. As a longtime fan of the franchise, I was pretty excited for the movie. The premise alone had me intrigued ever since it was announced. This is what Saw X would entail, an in-between installment, as it could open the door for some interesting potential exploration of these characters, but at the same time, it could just make the Saw timeline even more convoluted. So it could have gone either way. I was hoping for the positive though. In this installment, we follow John Kramer, sick and desperate, traveling to Mexico for a risky experimental medical procedure in the hopes of it curing his cancer, only to discover the entire operation is a scam to defraud the most vulnerable. Now armed with a newfound purpose, John returns to his work, turning the tables on the con artist through a series of ingenious and terrifying traps. On paper, the premise for Saw X alone is very fascinating to me. Setting it in between Saw 1 and Saw 2, that era of Saw, in my opinion, is one of the most classic eras of the franchise, and tonally, Saw X does very much feel like it is in line with that era. Its overall aesthetic captures the look and feel of Saw 1 and Saw 2, but a more updated, sleeker look in terms of the filmmaking techniques. Now, if you're a longtime fan of the Saw franchise, you're more than well aware of the fact that the franchise continues to try a multitude of different ways to make sure that John Kramer is in the movie in some shape or form, usually through the form of flashbacks, given the fact that his character in the movies has been dead for an extremely long time. Saw 3, for context, was 17 years ago. Still, out of all the various different times they've tried to bring John Kramer back, I think this effort here is probably their best one so far. A big part of that is thanks to the fact that Saw X finally decides to put John Kramer center stage in a film more than ever before, chronicling his journey to Mexico, desperately clinging on to life each step of the way, and Tobin Bell, as per usual, just completely knocks his performance out of the park. Possibly even his best performance as the character yet, since there's so much nuance to the role in Saw X. I do feel like this film shows a side of Jigsaw that we have never seen before, gaining a deeper insight into him as a person. Arguably in this instance in Saw X, I suppose he's supposed to be the protagonist. You're supposed to be rooting for him, given the fact a large chunk of this movie is wrapped around him punishing all of these people who scammed him, saying that they would save his life. So in this instance, we'll just say that John Kramer is more of an anti-hero in Saw X. Mixing John's newfound purpose and revenge angle, the traps in Saw X reflect that wholeheartedly, because the traps overall in Saw X, they are gnarly. Even if the overall execution of some of these traps are fairly simple, they're extremely effective at being brutal and gory. Not that this franchise has ever shied away from showcasing some nasty traps, but for me at least, some of the traps you see in Saw X I think contend for some of the best we've seen in the franchise. Some of them you've seen in the trailers already, like the eye vacuum, or the man drilling into his own skull. Both of those are just nasty. You get the full showcase of what the eye vacuum trap is about. That might be my personal favorite of the entire movie. Needless to say, if you're going into this wanting some extreme traps, I think you're definitely going to be leaving satisfied. I'd be remiss not to mention the fact that Tobin Bell is not the only legacy character to return for Saw X. Amanda also is here as well. Out of the ever-growing long list of Jigsaw apprentices, Amanda was the one that I always liked the most, and Shawnee Smith didn't disappoint returning to this role in Saw X. I think her role in the story was executed brilliantly. In certain sequences in Saw X, I would say that she kind of steals the show. It is incredibly noticeable that she does not look the exact same. They did their best to make Amanda look almost exactly like she did back in Saw 1 and Saw 2, but it's been almost 2 decades since those movies came out, so it just is what it is. As a longtime fan of the franchise, we all know that this franchise is no stranger to having some wild flashback logic, like having John Kramer appear in these flashbacks getting older, but he has a backwards hat on, so he's supposed to be younger. It was enjoyable and fun time as I had watching Saw X and all the events unfold. There isn't necessarily a lot of stakes, or at least I didn't feel them, because it's a prequel, an in-between-quel to be exact, so you necessarily don't have to worry about where some of these characters are going to end up by the film's end, because no matter what happens in Saw X and the twists and turns in the story, you know that no matter what, John Kramer and Amanda's stories don't conclude here. So there's just not a lot of tension to be built up in the story. That isn't to say that Saw X all around is devoid of fun Easter eggs and surprises for longtime Saw fans. Still, nevertheless, I had a fun time watching Jigsaw get revenge on these people. The big thing that I was wondering while watching Saw X is, given that we have this idea now, these in-between-quels, I wonder what they could do with the franchise and continue that on for potentially future installments. Of course, I still want to see the timeline go forward, but I wonder if we can sprinkle in some other in-between-quels following some other characters from this franchise. Whether it be Hoffman, or Dr. Gordon, or that apprentice in Jigsaw that we've heard nothing nothing about ever since. All around, however, Saw X is a surprisingly well-executed in-between installment in this franchise. It gives you all the staples that you'd expect, capturing the classic feel of Saw 1 and Saw 2, while allowing Tobin Bell and Shawnee Smith to get a more meaty role as these iconic characters returning to the franchise. This overall just felt like a love letter to the Saw fans at large. I think if you're a big Saw fan, especially if you've been sticking around with this franchise ever since the beginning, you're going to be pretty happy leaving this installment. But make sure you check out the mid-credit scene, because there is a mid-credit scene. I know that is kind of odd to expect in a Saw film, but there is a mid-credit scene, and it is pretty fun. I definitely think you're going to want to stick around for it. I had a blast with it. But now for my thoughts on Saw X, make sure you share your thoughts down below. What did you think of the film? Once you get a chance to check it out, did you like the film? Did you not like the film? Make sure you share all your thoughts down below, because part of the fun of this time, that conversation with you guys in the comment section down below. And thank you guys, as always, check out the videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you like on the video, and also subscribe to the channel so you get reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. Next time, I'll see you guys later.